Welcome to Ace of Pentacles, your career strategy and workplace wellness podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so happy you're here. Join me every week as we investigate how people design and discover their way through their careers. Together, we'll explore the science of well-being at work and discover tools and strategies to help us do well and be well. Hi, Dr. Bramante.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for making the time. Dr. Bramante, you blend psychology, performance strategy, and AI to help performers, educators, and creators unlock their potential. You're also a professor of psychology and you coach artists. You do a lot of really cool things. So I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great journey.
Tell us a little bit about how you got here, how you specifically help people address self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, recognizing it, and then also kind of navigating their way through it and making sure it doesn't prevent them from being successful. So tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. Well, I started off as a straight up clinical psych major and specialization. That's what I wanted to do. It wasn't until I was going for a master's degree that I took some classes in solution-focused brief psychotherapy and more provocative types of therapy. In a sense, what we mean by provocative, that non-traditional might be bordering on the side of controversial. So and that was kind of approaches I started gravitating more towards, at least feeling-wise, rather than the long drawn-out clinical medical model of psychotherapy. So then started into a PhD program. Now, while I also was doing this, I had very much of an interest in creative arts and film, TV, just in the whole idea of watching things being done, from start to finish. It was very, very interesting for me. And then also at heart, I'm a people connector, and that's what I really felt like I was, kind of born and destined to do, is connect people together, great people together. So I started doing this when I was volunteering at film festivals. So I did this a lot when I was in New York, when I was working in between jobs. I did a lot of volunteer work because I kind of wanted to pursue the creative side of things. I was a drama club in high school. I took some classes in college in theater and acting, and it was very interesting. And I really felt so at home with the theater kids than I did with the academics. And so that's where I kind of feel like my world is really sort of in both realms, but even more, I felt more with theater and acting types. But I wasn't necessarily an actor myself. When it came to a conclusion, because of after I did some kind of like searching what I want to do with the rest of my life, it was like 25, 26. I decided I was going to start my, managing talent, managing actors, representing them, advocating for them, and connecting them to each other and different projects. And that's just kind of like brought in the birth of being a talent agent. While I was doing this, I was hired to start teaching part-time at a community college, and I started my PhD program. How I started with the self-sabotage route was a habit I was seeing a lot with my clients and a lot with the students I was working with. And it was something that was kind of like baffling me, like, and confusing me, like, why is this happening? Why am I seeing such a high degree of self-sabotage? It wasn't just like one or two cases, this was a lot. And both the types of people I was working with, both students and actors. So for my doctoral dissertation, the idea was to pick a subject or pick a question, a burning question that we have, that we want answers to. And that was like, why do people self-sabotage? Was kind of like my thing, especially performing artists. So my dissertation was on self-defeating behavior of performing artists. And that's what I did my actual research study on.
You mentioned that you were recognizing this behavior in your clients. Can you tell us a little bit about, maybe give an example of what that behavior might look like for those who might not even know that they're self-sabotaging?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say most of the time in the beginning, when you first discover news, you have no idea. It's not like it's a conscious behavior. It's really, in a sense, where you're shooting yourself in the foot, where you're kind of being almost like being an unconscious martyr, in a sense, where you're actually you're doing actions or steps that are kind of taking you out, keeping you backwards than pushing you forwards. And what that would look like for an actor would be not preparing fully for a role, not showing up for an audition, finding excuses not to go on auditions, Because in order to have success as an actor, especially when you're getting established, is you have to audition and audition regularly. And if you're not doing that, you're not you're not going to move forward in your career as an actor or an artist or creative. So I was seeing a lot of that, whether it's not showing up for auditions, coming up for reasons why you can't make auditions, and the conscious mind can be very elaborate and very tricky and very treacherous.
Mm-hmm.
So it might come up with I'm a little too tired, or I don't feel like going on this audition, or it's really a waste of time. When there might be something going on underneath that is incredibly subconscious, meaning that there might be some fear there, fear of success, fear of failure, imposter syndrome. And what I found is that there's a strong relationship between imposter syndrome and self-sabotage. So, and what I mean by imposter syndrome, because this is a term that's been thrown around for a long time, and in almost every circle. So, the textbook definition is really when you feel like you're a fraud, or you feel like the world's going to find out that you're not qualified, and you start to have this fear, where you're not equipped to do what you do. Like you're not that talented of an actor, you're not that talented of an educator, whatever that is. People are going to find that you have that constant fear of looking over your shoulder that someone's going to find this out. And this could be totally subconscious, because very rarely will you hear somebody say, "I'm self-sabotaging today," or "Today I have imposter syndrome." You'll see it in other types of behaviors, be like, aha, well, maybe that's what they're going through. So in this case, you have to look at behavior. And if I was working with someone who suspects that they might have that, I would never come out and say, well, you have imposter, that's what's wrong. Because I don't. Consciously, I don't. Nothing's wrong with me. But I would point it out in a sense, I would just maybe mention consistency in their behavior and their words. So you're saying this actions, but yet this is happening. Like, you say you want to be an actor, but yet I'm seeing all these auditions that you're either not preparing for or you're turning down. What's going on here?
And so that's the thing that gives you, as their coach, a clue to, okay, the problem might be imposter syndrome.
Right, and it might be, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the role of a coach, at least one that is a good coach, is to ask questions and not necessarily be in your face prescribing. This is what's wrong with you today. No, I mean, a coach, we may be operating under that framework, but the question is, we'll ask you questions to help you come up with the insight on your own. Because when you come on that insight on your own, you're more likely to deal with it rather than to shoot it down. So, did you think that, maybe, why are you turning on? Come tell me a reason why you think you're turning down all these auditions. And that would be like, well, I thought you said you wanted to be an actor. Well, what's going on? And a lot of times, sometimes you'll get levels of insight that they go, well, maybe this is it. Other times it takes a while to come to it. And some people may never get it initially for a while, and then make the connection. Because our brain, this is a byproduct of our brain and our nervous system. Now, our brain and nervous system is doing its job by protecting us from danger. Whether that's real danger or perceived danger knows no difference. For thousands of years, our brain and our nervous system is designed to keep us alive, and it's doing its job. However, we're not in the same dangers as we were hundreds and thousands of years ago. Evolved. We're not in the hunter-gathering days where we had to worry about, daily, our lives were at stake. Brains don't necessarily know that on a subconscious or reptilian level. So it's doing its job to protect us. And maybe going a little too far for some people and counterproductive. So
Yeah. Dr. Bramante, can you share a personal moment when you faced imposter syndrome or self-sabotage and how you moved through it?
Well, I would definitely say with self-sabotage, two instances come to mind. When I was in the midst, knee deep into my PhD studies and completed all the coursework, but I had this dissertation to complete. But I was also at the same time juggling so much. I was building my agency, and at that time I was hired full time. I was working full time in a college and teaching full time. So not only was I teaching, it was only all these committees. So I spread myself too thin, and that was the first sign of self-sabotage. When people bury themselves into work so much that they burn themselves out. And that was what I was doing. And it wasn't until, and then I almost was like to a point where maybe I should just drop out of the PhD program. Because at that time, no momentum was happening, and every quarter I was having to pay tuition. So it was like, I started to think, well, maybe I'll just drop out. I'm glad I didn't, obviously, because I never would have had the PhD. I would have had what some people have the title behind it, an ABD, which is all for dissertation, which is really nothing. I mean, that's just a fancy way of saying I dropped out of grad school. So I didn't want that, and it wasn't until I, woke up, I ended the teaching position, not by choice. They, decided not to renew my contract. So that led me to more time to finish the dissertation. I could have easily had to quit. There were times where I almost had the phone picked up and saying, I want to become inactive in the college. It would have been the biggest mistake. That was the first instance. The second instance was with my book. I was dragging my feet with my book because my book is loosely based on my dissertation. So, like the outline. And I, for years, I was telling people I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And this is what I'm going to do the book on, which is ironic because that's what I was going. What I wrote the book on is what I was going through. So I kept coming up with excuses that I don't have enough time, and maybe I'm just not meant to write the book because I would sit in front of a computer, cut a couple of pages in, at least a couple of paragraphs, maybe one or two pages, go back and read them, and become so frustrated that I would delete the entire thing. And then here I am on a blank page again. And I even came to the conclusion, well, maybe this book writing thing ain't for me. It wasn't until, again, I woke up to say, okay, no. One trick that I learned is, number one, to stop overthinking things. And two, when you're writing or creating something, it's best to do it without editing it first. So don't self-edit until you're complete. That's what one of my mentors told me, who published 15 books of his own. I said that's a trick that kind of helped him move forward, was to write and then edit when you're completely done, because then there's going to be less likely and less of an urge to throw it out. And that was true, because there was even when I did go back to make myself edits and some changes, there was no way. I already had a manuscript. I'm not throwing that out. So I then made some changes of my own and then hired two professional editors. But had I listened to the inner voice in me at that time, it would have told me to not publish, and I wouldn't have done that. Because now, on another level, it would have been safer for me not to publish because I wouldn't be putting myself out there. So there is a safety factor in there too that has to be kind of worked with and worked through, not just because, again, it's keeping us alive. So, and avoiding us from danger, and then that danger could be making ourselves vulnerable. Because even when I publish something, I am in some small way making myself vulnerable, because I can get the book can get trashed online, and can get poor reviews.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a risk that we all take anytime we put something out there, that we're going to get criticism. So we are risking ourselves. Like, even the fact, I'm just giving I'm just saying this even as a state of argument. Even being a guest on this podcast, I'm opening myself up. We're opening ourselves up. Now, most 98 to 99% of the time, in reality, it's not going to be anything bad at all. However, the process is still happening. We're putting ourselves out there, which is the very thing that we need to be doing, but it may not be comfortable in the beginning. And so part of overcoming this, and especially when I work with people, even with actors, is being okay with being uncomfortable. I think some people expect it to be, I'm doing something different, I'm going to be comfortable. No, you're not. It's going to be something new. It's going to be something different. The first time I went live on social media was a little bit terrifying, because it was something I never done before.
Yeah.
But, it's something that we have to do. If we want to change, we have to make some changes. We can't expect our lives to change if we're not going to change. And that's the biggest lesson I think I've learned. If we want, most everyone will say they want to change, especially if you're listening to it and you have a podcast, especially this one, there's something you want to improve. But I can tell you this, is that there's no way that's going to improve if you don't take any action in there.
Yeah.
So even inaction could be a form of self-sabotage.
Yeah, that resonates so much with me, because I do think I love that there's so many podcasts out there. I have a podcast. We're on a podcast right now. I love that there's so much information out there. And I always tell my clients, you can have all of the information and you can collect it all and it will stay inside you until you actually have the courage to do something with it. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's what you work with artists on, is to actually
Hmm.
remove the blocks that prevent them from taking everything that's inside of them and actually doing something with it.
Yeah, and again, the information is great, but the important thing is to do something with it and apply it in some way. So it's important to kind of just, in reality, just is to take action on what you've learned and what you're doing. And with actors, it's about getting out there and auditioning and just trying to working to find ways to do this all the time. And it may be terrible because as an actor, you're making yourself extremely vulnerable when you go to auditions. So that can be uncomfortable by putting yourself out there, by making yourself vulnerable. But that's what's needed if you want to get hired in have a work until you become like an A-lister. And even though they do have to audition, but still you have to audition. And I think there's a lot of judgment because in show business, it's one of the most competitive industries out there. It's exciting, and I love what I do. But the reality is that it's extremely competitive.
From your perspective, what is something about imposter syndrome that is really misunderstood?
The fact that it's a stigma or that it's a form of weakness, because most people, especially high performing CEOs, A-list celebrities, all have some degree of imposter syndrome. And there's no way to completely get rid of it because that would mean you're not humble anymore. The idea here is to work with it and let it be your friend. Now, keep you grounded and humble, but it shouldn't hold you back. So you do have to temper it a little bit. But I think the biggest misconception is that we need to get rid of it completely, and that's not, in my opinion, feasible. However, what we can do is learn to work with it, not let it work against us.
Okay, so work with your imposter syndrome and know that it's not something that's ever going to go away. You just need to learn how to manage it, it sounds like.
Yeah, and not let it hold you back. I mean, yeah, and what I would often do is like if somebody's having any self doubt, because that's what really is about, is self doubt. What exactly are you doubting on? What are you questioning on? And if it's something that's information related, well then what's your plan to get that information?
Mm.
And one of the mindsets I always think that's important to adapt is to always learning mindset. Is you'll always be learning. Even if your formal education is completely over, you're never going to stop learning new stuff. I have a terminal degree by nature, but however, I'm always learning, and I'm always wanting to learn new things. And it's very important to be open to learning new things.
Mm. Dr. Bramante, how do you advise actors, creatives, artists to continue learning? What do you, is there, is it about like how do you motivate yourself? Or
Well,
is it a little bit more strategic than that?
I mean, it's a little strategic. I think a lot of people sit there and say, "Well, I just have to wait for the motivation." Well, you're going to be waiting a long time for that. Motivation is taking action, so it's like creating that by doing things on a consistent basis, setting out a schedule. Spend 20 minutes reading or listening to an audiobook. If you don't read, listening is great. Listening to podcasts. Schedule one or two a day. Read a couple sections of an audiobook if you don't like to read physical books. But do something with that and just try out something new. Another trick is to even try learning something you may not even think that you may want to be interested in. Explore new subjects, even within your subject. I go to a lot of conferences, and there's times where I'll go to talks that I might not have never gone to if I was constantly just looking for one topic. And I'm glad I did because some of those were the best talks I've attended in certain conferences, or the ones I didn't think I was going to get much out of.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Learning things that you don't maybe think that you want to learn or don't think align with your career objectives, because I find that when I take courses that are really different from the stuff that I do, it ends
Hmm.
up helping me kind of pull pieces together and organize and connect my
Hmm.
knowledge.
Absolutely, and we can pull stuff in from everything, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the important thing is to make it a choice to learn. And it's not finding the motivation is allowing the motivation to come in. So setting a time each day to learn something.
Yeah, I like that reframe about motivation because when you think about motivation, I think people think about effort and putting in the work, and you're saying it's about allowing motivation to come in.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be work to be put in, but
Mhm.
at the same time, it's making that a part of your daily thing. It's the same thing like if getting motivated to go to the doctors. Well, nobody's going to want to go to the doctor. Just got to do it.
Yeah.
If you wait for the motivation, you're going to wait till you're sick, and that's when you're going to be motivated to go. But the important thing is to take action and make deliberate action.
Yeah. Dr. Bramante, you say that you blend AI into the mix with your coaching. And I'm curious, how do you blend AI with mindset coaching or performance strategy, especially to help people overcome fear and doubt?
Well, it's great as a research tool and as a content partner. So there's one of the examples I will use over this about when Chat GPT first came out in the market in November 2022. I wasn't really up until like May or June 23 that I really started to wanting to learn it. Because at first I thought I have no use for this. I don't want to do this. I'm not really into computers. This really has nothing to do with it. Until I got to play with it, and I was like, this is cool. So what I think it can do, helping a creative person, is come up with ideas, come up with outlines, giving you different perspectives on things, giving you different viewpoints. Now, the one thing I like to use AI as a balance, as more of an amplify what I'm doing. I kind of advise against going purely all in. I think people, with the AI thing, sometimes make two mistakes. They ignore it completely, or they over depend themselves. Like, I find it a bit scary and disturbing right now that people are turning to AI chatbots for companionship and partnership. Not necessarily saying it's a fault of that, but it's like those are really only people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even the founder, ChatGPT OpenAI said this is not what this is supposed to be used for. Like companionship or even therapy. Like I'm very skeptical when I hear of an AI chatbot doing therapy because all it's doing is giving you predictive text and maybe feed you the right terms,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to know your body language. It's not going to be able to calibrate your nonverbal expression and to really think on the spot. It's great for giving you affirmation. It's great for giving you general tips, but that's still not going to replace a human coach or human therapist. So when it comes to just creativity, it gives you ideas. It's a great brainstorming tool. But you should bring your idea that you already have to it, not expecting it to come up with everything on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Bramante, in your work with actors and creatives, where does imposter syndrome show up the most? And why do you think it hits so hard in that industry specifically?
Well, it comes up especially with when you're not working.
Mm.
And that happens a lot especially with actors and with show business.
Mm.
Because it's such a very competitive industry, there's a lot more no's that are going to be yeses, which means there's going to be more of that self-doubt. And there's going to be, starting to feel depression because of not getting that work. So, which means that we have to work in building up confidence.
Mm.
And as the longer the period goes where there's no work, that means there's going to be more of the self-doubt coming in. So, what we need to do is to kind of help either keep your mind active. So, it's a great idea for actors and creatives to have outside interests rather than just strictly on the art that they're creating. But when you get told no so many more times than yes, it starts to create a series of self-doubt because you went to school for acting and because you are really designing, your life around being an actor and you're not getting it, which means you may start to perceive yourself as being a failure. Why am I not working for the past 6 months? And then you have well-intentioned family members who are not in, creative arts industry saying, I think that's great you give us that, but it's time to get a real job. It's time to get a job. And of course, as you know, that is a real job. That is a job. But if you're not in that world, you may not quite really understand or have an appreciation for what actors go through. So that's why the reason why a lot of actors and creatives have self-sabotage there's a lot of no's. So what we can do is reframe failure. So if we say there's no such thing as failure and feedback, well, that's a great statement, which means that there's no such, there's only learning from there. And as you start to internalize that there's no such thing as as failure, only feedback, that means that you have opportunities to learn. And as you have these opportunities to learn, you'll find that you're getting smarter and smarter every day. So that's just a way to kind of look at things. The important thing is to look at your strengths. And even when there's periods of self-doubt and periods of inaction in the entertainment industry, because there are moments where maybe you're not getting employed for a period of time. But we can look at it from that you're getting better and better by practicing, and take each failure or each no that you receive as a stepping stone closer to your success. Because if we reframe it to say, well, I received a no today, which means there could be a yes tomorrow.
Yeah. I really like that reframe from thinking about it as failure to thinking about it as feedback.
Yeah. And I would also like to reframe the word rejection, because I often hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to be an actor, or I got tired of that because I got tired of all the rejection. Well, how about this? What if we look at as there's no such thing as rejection? Only a simple reminder that your services are not needed today.
I like that. Yeah. You're trained in hypnosis and NLP, and I'm so curious about that. I know you said in your introduction there were non-traditional forms of therapy that you were exploring. I think, is this what you meant with hypnosis and NLP?
That is one of the reasons why I gravitated towards that, because it's a state of working with the unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind is working all the time. It's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps us breathing. It's what keeps us, surviving. And it actually, if we leave it untamed, it'll guide us into what we need to do. The issue is we're not completely aware of this part of us. And we're so focused on worrying too much about the future or the past that we don't let our natural instincts kind of help us take over. So part of what hypnosis and NLP is we're helping you tap into the resources that you need and that you already have.
Yeah. How does using hypnosis and NLP help you as a coach help your clients break these cycles of self-doubt?
It leads to a better understanding, especially when we're looking at the unconscious mind, because when hypnotists look at the unconscious mind, what you often find is that there's a deeper understanding of what's going on, what the motivations are. And when you have a deeper understanding of the motivations that's going on, you're able to help a lot more people. And which means, again, you've been much more effective in what you're doing. So the important thing is really understanding someone's deep motivation. And it really helped me out because, again, it's more provocative sense of things. Because most of the time you'll hear people say, I don't want to talk about the unconscious mind. What is that? Well, it's just simply what you're not aware of. Like, our unconscious mind is always working. When you write your name or write something down on a piece of paper, you don't focus on the letters. Like when you were learning the alphabet in kindergarten or first grade, when you learned to write, you notice you had to spend a lot of time looking at the letters, making sure they're lined up. Now you just write without even looking at it. You don't even have to look down your paper and you already have all the letters there because your unconscious mind knows how to write. It's already doing that. You're just not aware of it. So let's tap more into that.
Dr. Bramante, one of the things that you talk a lot about is this fear-based mindset. Can you tell us a little bit more about how people fall into that trap of developing a fear-based mindset to the point where sometimes it's really hard to get out of it and you might need something like hypnosis to help you?
Sure. Well, the one thing that we really understand that fear is not our enemy.
The fear is not what?
Fear is not our enemy. The fear is actually, again, there to help us survive. So if we didn't have fear, we would have been extinct a long time ago. We wouldn't be here right now because our brain, we would have been flying right into the direct danger all the time. So fear is there to protect us. Sometimes it can even overdrive, And one of the things in therapy that's really helpful with fears is to really kind of confront it rather than hiding behind it or dancing around it. And again, this is where provocative comes in. So it's going to involve at some point you getting confronting whatever makes you phobic or scared. Sometimes that could be other people. Sometimes that could be achievement even. Or if you have like let's say somebody has a phobia, fear of flying or fear of dogs, the only way you're going to get over that fully is to confront that fear, which means you're going to have to pet a dog eventually if you have a dog phobia. If you have a fear of flying, no, unless you really are okay with it, but most people, are not going to be able to travel. So until you get on a plane for the first time, it's like kind of like just ripping a band-aid off completely when it comes to facing it. No, of course, in a gentle way, there's steps that lead up to it. But the important thing, and this is where hypnosis comes in, because there could be a reason for that fear. Maybe when you were 5 years old, a dog jumped on you or barked loudly or startled you or even attacked you, or you watched somebody else get attacked. So now you have this memory going on constantly being active. Because one of the surprising things is that memories are not time sensitive, they're always active. Because when you start to think about something, you're going to start to have the feelings associated with that moment coming in. Because your brain does not know that that's the past. Your brain is thinking it's currently going on right now. That's why you start to experience the emotions when you start reflecting on the past.
Okay.
Now, what we can do is orientate to the future. Imagine what it would be like if you didn't have this fear. What would that look like? If you didn't have fear of success today or fear of public speaking, what would that look like? Well, I'd be giving you all these speeches today. Well, what would that look like? And then you just kind of get someone to be, even imagine themselves in the future. What would that be like to get up and give that speech without any fear?
Yeah.
And start thinking like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I do hypnotherapy, that's usually where I go with my clients is very much, let's imagine that this didn't exist. What would you then do? And
Yeah,
it's surprising how quickly people can come up with that.
right. And that's what we call solution focused work because it's like, well, or even like I'm sure you've heard this too, the famous miracle question. If I could wave a wand and this problem would be gone,
Yeah.
tell me what this would be like for you, or
Mm-hmm.
tell me what this would look like for you. Now I'm having them imagine it. Now, what the interesting about the brain is that our imagination does not know the difference between reality and fiction. So yeah, and what I would do is what we call what I would say like intensify. Now, in our circles, we call it revivify, which means make it more vivid, make that memory more vivid, make that idea that you don't have the fear more vivid. Because if you ever watch a stage hypnotist show, I mean, on some aspect it is a little, I wouldn't say, complete reflective on what hypnosis can do. But if you have people going up there who are acting really funny and strange, they may have had crippling stage fright 5 minutes ago. Now they're able to be like this. Can you imagine what you can really do as far as fears is concerned? Because if we can, and this is where like sometimes with hypnotic demonstration, we might, suggest that someone forgets their name.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not just for the shock and awe, which is what it'll do. Like people are like, oh, this is so amazing or even so scary. But if I can make someone forget their name, couldn't I also make them forget their pain or their fears?
Yeah.
And so if I can do that, so that's where that works with the unconscious mind.
Yeah. One of the concerns that people sometimes have with hypnotherapy or hypnosis or this kind of work, NLP, is that they feel like they won't be in charge or they won't be in control of themselves. What do you say to someone who comes to you with maybe that
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, again, we would talk about what we were saying, because again, most people see it in movies, and I'm sure I would have to say that it's very poorly portrayed in movies. Yeah,
It is.
yeah, it's very poorly portrayed, and even on TV. Because remember, it's all about ratings, it's all about sensationalizing. Clinical hypnotherapy, while being very powerful, is very not does not make interesting TV. It's not sensational. But what it's doing is, for one thing, you're completely aware of what's going on. Because what you might see is on TV or on stage, hypnotists yelling the word sleep, and then you drop, you see people falling or look like they're sleeping, but they're not sleeping. They're in a flow state, even if you want to say it like that. They're in a euphoric state of euphoria almost, and focus and hyper focus. So they're not. It is not the same thing as sleep at night, and that's the one thing I would say. You're completely aware of what's going on. Because I think sometimes when people go for the first time, they may not think it worked because they'll say, "Well, I wasn't hypnotized. How you know? I heard everything you said."
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
well, yeah. I mean, we don't. Yeah, and the thing is that we're hypnotized on a daily basis.
Right.
Commercial, by politics, by media. Let's just say this way: you come home at night, and your partner tells you, "Honey, you look tired today. You got bags in your eyes."
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden you start thinking like, I really am tired. But meanwhile, 30 seconds ago, you didn't feel tired, did you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of of really what a hypnotist does with people. It's like, okay, I'm going to suggest this, and you're going to either accept it or not. So in this case, in that simple conversational interaction, you're accepting a suggestion that you might be tired.
Yeah, I think that's a great example to demonstrate how, we can all be very suggestible. And I think that sometimes is the problem with the way that we approach our careers and the way that we think about success. Because if you think about the stories that people tell about like things like the job market and how possible anything is for anyone, and you have to take into account that there are a lot of stories, a lot of narratives built around success that are rooted in fear. And we
Mhm.
catch on to those. We're super suggestible to those.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. You could even make an argument that there's really no such thing as hypnosis, only suggestion,
Mm-hmm.
only being open to suggestion. And if you weren't suggestible, you couldn't learn. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody is suggestible. So there's a lot, like sometimes I'll hear in conversations, oh, I can't be hypnotized. And I want to, gently say, I'm like, you've already been hypnotized probably thousands of times before we even had this conversation.
Yeah.
And even the fact that you're saying that is a form of hypnosis right there. That I can't be hypnotized. Okay, so you're putting it in there. But what I will also say is that we can't infringe on someone's free will, which means that I'm not going to be able to make someone do anything against their will
Yeah.
if they're not if they're morally opposed to doing something.
Mm-hmm.
No. So that's the one thing I'm saying. Look, if there's something you're not comfortable doing, I'm not going to be able to make. I can't make you do anything. In reality, it's you're the one that's coming up with a suggestion.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to somebody who was in a stage show, who was like a really good volunteer and was dropping down and doing all these tasks. And we were on this conversation. People say, "Well, why were you doing that?" And it wasn't. And they even said because I wanted to do it. I had a strong urge to do it on my own. So in reality, it's almost like you're coming with we may be making the suggestions,
Mm-hmm.
but you're coming up with the ideas yourself. So it's like one definition, which may sound a little bit authoritarian, but it would be like giving someone a suggestion and making them feel like it was their own idea.
Okay. So I think about it a little bit differently just because
Well, yeah, I mean
I
that I
actually,
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if I accept that
I
definition either.
I understand and what you mean. So the way that I do my hypnotherapy work is I
Hmm.
work with my client to create the script that I will then read to them. So it's their language,
Right.
their words that we're using and their intention, which I know every hypnotherapist I hope is doing,
Oh,
using
for
a
sure.
person's own intention to help them, right? The way that I think about it is I'm going to be the facilitator of an experience that you're going to have, but you get to define the experience.
Yes. Yeah. I'm who am I to tell you what your
Yeah.
experience is? I don't know. Your subconscious. Subconscious knows what's best to do. Your subconscious knows what you need to do. The only thing is because of fear, because of the outside conditioning, we've stopped listening.
Yeah.
We just so it's all about tapping into that. So
Mm-hmm. I
you
mean,
know,
now you can get a hypnotherapy script from Chat GPT. Someone recently told me this, and I was like,
yeah.
okay.
If I were to grade a script on ChatGPT, I probably would give it like a C or a C minus. It has a structure there, but it's so generic.
It is. It is. Yeah.
What I often do was when you're the reason why we put people in trance is because you remove that outside voice, that critical voice. So you would have someone tap into it. They would kind of tell you directly if they're really in focus and tune. You'd be surprised at what people can come up with about what their solutions to the problems.
For sure.
They're
I'm
very
always
profound.
surprised. I'm surprised at every meeting what my clients come up with. When they're in that trance state, I mean, like I imagine it being very beautiful for them wherever they are, whatever they're seeing, and
Hmm.
it's so incredible to me. I think it's just such a wonder what our imaginations can give to us.
Absolutely. It really is. it really is powerful. And then you repeat back what they say in their own words and their own, and then that could be the script. Or there's times where I might repeat it over and over again before we kind of bring them back out. It's like, okay, now said this is the suggestion you need. So in reality, the client is the one writing the script that you're going to need, in front of you.
Correct.
And they'll see these forms on social media. Oh, I need a script for this.
Yeah. I love this conversation about hypnosis. You and I are going to have to chat more about it at some
I'd love
point.
to come back. Yeah.
Dr. Bramante, just as we wrap up, if you could reframe imposter syndrome as a signal rather than a setback, what would it be telling us?
The signal is that we have potential and that we're always learning and stay humble. But also at the same time, celebrate your success. But stay humble and stay learning.
And what is one belief or mindset shift that you wish every performer, creative, creator, artist, educator could internalize today?
You can do this. You are capable.
Yeah. Dr. Bramante, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
I would just really encourage you to keep living. Everyone keep taking action and doing things that you want to do. If I can be of help in any way, you can reach out to me on social media. I'm very easy to find. And I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
being
Thank
here
you,
today.
Sarah.
Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too.